Disclaimer. The information presented regarding the alleged interaction with an extraterrestrial being is not scientifically proven and should be approached with a critical and skeptical mindset. The views and opinions expressed in this context do not necessarily reflect those of the platform or its affiliates. The story is presented for entertainment and educational purposes only. Viewers should conduct their research and seek reputable sources before drawing any conclusions about extraterrestrial life or the existence of other worlds. In September of 2007, Lawrence Spencer, a science fiction author, received a package from Ireland sent by a person named MacElroy. The package contained a letter and a collection of manuscripts. Upon reading the letter, Lawrence recalled that he had attempted to interview a Lady MacElroy about the Roswell incident 10 years prior. MacElroy was rumored to have been a nurse who had communicated with extraterrestrial beings during the incident. Despite being sworn to secrecy, MacElroy had decided to reveal the secret before her passing. Lawrence was shocked by this revelation and hoped that the manuscripts would provide some insight. Lawrence was an author who was passionate about mysteries and extraterrestrial civilizations. He had written several books on the subject and was particularly interested in uncovering the truth about the 1947 Roswell incident. While working on his latest book, The Oz Factor, Lawrence discovered that MacElroy was the nurse who had allegedly communicated with the extraterrestrial beings. After conducting extensive research, Lawrence eventually located MacElroy, who was 74 years old at the time. Despite Lawrence's persistent questioning, MacElroy refused to reveal any details about the incident, only admitting that she had worked at the Walker Air Force Base near the Roswell UFO crash site in 1947. Lawrence left his contact information with MacElroy and sent her a copy of his latest book. 10 years had passed since Lawrence attempted to interview Mrs. MacElroy about the Roswell incident. He had forgotten about it until he received a package containing 3 types of documents. The first type was a collection of illegible handwriting drafts on the pages of a student diary book. The second type was typed manuscripts, weighing 20 pounds, written on an old-fashioned typewriter. The third type was a file printed on different paper. Despite the messy handwriting, Lawrence discovered that the manuscripts contained information about conversations between Mrs. MacElroy and an extraterrestrial being during the Roswell UFO crash, which he had been pursuing for years. It seemed that Mrs. MacElroy had been moved by Lawrence's sincerity 10 years prior or had never expected anyone to find her. Regardless, she had decided to disclose her secret. Lawrence attempted to contact Mrs. MacElroy using the information provided in the package, but only her landlord answered the phone. He informed Lawrence that Mrs. MacElroy and her husband had been euthanized a few weeks prior. In Ireland, euthanasia is legal, indicating that the package had been sent posthumously. In her manuscripts, Mrs. MacElroy explained that, "I had lived with extreme pain since 1947, and had known something that Airl was not supposed to know. I had been told that keeping my secret was necessary to protect humanity, because extraterrestrial civilizations were monitoring Earth. If the truth were to be revealed, it could cause panic and confusion among the people, who had been educated to endure the government and media's narrative. I cannot reveal the truth to the public as it has been corrected. I am aware of the disappearance of many insiders and whistleblowers who spoke up about it. Despite having access to insider information, I have chosen to remain silent. However, I do not want this secret, which has been kept hidden for 60 years, to be buried with me in my grave. It is everyone's right to know the truth." According to MacElroy, Lawrence wrote a book called Alien Interview, in which he disclosed unheard-of information. The truth behind the Roswell incident is that a UFO really did crash in Roswell on July 4, 1947. The military initially confirmed that they had found a crashed UFO on a ranch in Roswell and didn't know how to handle it, so they informed the media. The Roswell Daily newspaper published on the front page, "RAAF captures flying saucer." But a few days later, the Air Force found an UFO and humanoid bodies, and they knew they had a serious problem. They immediately opened a press conference, changed their attitude, and claimed that it was a weather balloon instead of a flying saucer. When rumors arose about extraterrestrial being bodies, they opened a second press conference and claimed that they were human dummies on the weather balloon. Their reneging behavior was very suspicious. At the time of the crash, Airl was working in the medical group at Walker Air Force Base and was assigned to the crash site to implement emergency medical assistance for pilots and survivors of the second aircraft accident. I witnessed the scene of an extraterrestrial spacecraft crashing with my own eyes. The first flying saucer crashed on a ranch, and there was only smashed wreckage at the crash site with no discovery of any extraterrestrials. The second flying saucer crashed 8 kilometers away from the ranch at Corona Town and was discovered by an equestrian. Most people didn't know the second flying saucer existed, and it was relatively intact as a whole. It looked like an aircraft instead of a flying saucer, resembling a triangular aircraft with a black color. There was a large hole above the aircraft with 5 seats in the interior, and 5 small extraterrestrial beings were wearing silver one-piece uniforms. They lost their lives under crash impact, except for one survivor. No one present was able to communicate with the surviving extraterrestrial because she neither used verbal language nor recognized any symbols. However, as Airl was examining the injuries of the patient, Airl immediately sensed and realized that this extraterrestrial life form was attempting to communicate with me. The communication was not through any language, but rather a form of mental imagery, or telepathic thoughts, generated directly from the psyche. I immediately reported this phenomenon to my superior, as no one else present at the time was able to receive these thoughts, and the extraterrestrial seemed willing to communicate with me. After a brief discussion with a senior military officer, it was decided that Airl would accompany the extraterrestrial back to the military base. Upon reflecting on my memories, I think the reason why the extraterrestrial being was willing to communicate with me was because I was a nurse, and not an aggressive military staff member. I was the only person who did not carry any weapons at the crash site, so perhaps she trusted me. I helped carry her on a stretcher and accompanied her back to the military base. I was assigned the identity of an interpreter and given a detailed questionnaire by some military and non-military personnel. They requested me to ask the extraterrestrial being questions from the questionnaire and make a detailed record of each answer. This was an extraordinary mission, and my confidential clearance level was raised, and I signed a confidentiality agreement. From July to August 1947, I was responsible for communicating with this extraterrestrial being. When I first saw her, I was scared. She was short and thin, about 1.2 meters tall, and looked like a 10-year-old child. Her skin was gray and smooth, and her arms, legs, and body were small. She only had 3 fingers and toes, and her fingers were very long. She had a disproportionately big head and outstandingly large eyes, suggesting that her eyes had extremely high visual acuity. I believed that those black, opaque crystalline structures in her eyes could receive light beyond the spectrum and particles, possibly including the entire electromagnetic spectrum or more, within the range of her vision. She had no ears or nose, only 2 small holes for a nose, and her mouth was a seam. It was unlikely that she needed to eat or speak, since they were probably traveling in space where sound could not transmit in a vacuum. I never heard her make any sound. I couldn't determine her gender physically or psychologically, because she didn't have any obvious reproductive organs. Her body seemed like a substitute or remote control device. Military personnel conducted autopsies on a few extraterrestrial beings' corpses and discovered that they didn't have organs or biological cell structures, but they had circuits or electronic nervous systems biased towards the whole body. We still do not understand how it works. This suggests that they were not real physical extraterrestrial beings, but rather conscious or spirit-possessed creatures used for dangerous missions or exploring other planets. Every time I communicated with the extraterrestrial being, officers from military intelligence agencies would attend, but they could not interrupt our communication, although I never had an opportunity to be alone with her. The communication method was amazing. It was as if we were communicating with our brains. She knew what I wanted to say, and what she said, I immediately understood too. It was as if she could capture my brain wave signal and place it in her frequency band. The first question I asked her was if she was hurt, and she said, yes. When I asked if she needed food, she said, no. It became clear that her body did not require oxygen, food, water, or any external nutrients or energy. She used her own energy for resupplying and maintaining body functions activity. An operation, like a battery that could be used for a long time after charging. Comparatively speaking, their body structure was much simpler than that of humans. It appeared that they were advanced biological cyborgs that were simple yet reliable. When I asked for her name, she replied with a no, but suggested that I call her Airl. I sensed that her name was a play on my name, MacElroy, and that she wanted to make me feel at ease. Airl informed me that she was the pilot of the spacecraft. Initially, I thought she would not answer any technical questions, as she belonged to some agency and needed to keep secrets. However, later on, I discovered that Airl had no intention of hiding anything. Airl was always honest and reliable with me, except for the questions she was unable to answer. When I asked about her body, it was exactly as I had predicted. Airl explained that it was neither a cyborg mechanical structure nor organism. It was a spiritual entity that could be remotely activated, and its skin was heat-resistant and adaptable to various pressures and atmospheric environments. Their bodies were also suitable for water environments, which made me think that they could explore planets that were completely dark and covered in oceans. Their smooth skin and super-sensitive eyes could come in handy. But I had to strictly follow the questions on the questionnaire. After asking Airl a question, I had to report it to the typists nearby, who would quickly and precisely record it. They had different tape recorders and cameras to make sure every spiritual dialogue was captured. My electrocardiogram was also being monitored during the conversation. I was informed that a foreign interpreter specialist was leading a code-breaking team that was coming to the base to participate and assist with the conversation between me and Airl. In addition, a psychological professor was also going to be present to help clarify questions and interpret Airl's replies. In the next episode, we will continue to tell you about the interview records of the extraterrestrial being Airl and the amazing information that it provided.